Let's go quickly to London, where Esther Krakue has stayed up late to be with us, as she does. Esther, great to see you, as always. We've had a big week here, but wow, what a week you've had in politics in Britain. David Cameron, it's like a zombie in a Michael Thriller video coming up out of the grave, and he's back. I thought we'd seen the last of that bloke. But anyway, he's back. Tell us about it, Esther.
Yeah, so Lord Cameron, which I still...
Lord Cameron, indeed.
Actually, I throw up in my mouth a little bit having to say that. He's back. He's been brought back from the dead. He's like a throwback nobody asked for. It's like if people brought back Westlife and you just think, why do we want to see middle-aged men trotting around on stage like they're in their 20s? This is exactly what it's like with David Cameron. The reality is he's quite unpopular with the nation, but he's deeply unpopular amongst the conservative right. I mean, the whole debacle you've seen in the last 10 years in Britain over Brexit and this kind of fight back against this globalist agenda has been against people like David Cameron. So to bring him back into the cabinet, someone who resigned from the party, like some sort of corpse resurrecting from the grave, just kind of highlights how desperate the Tories are. Now, he is in the role as in the cabinet as a foreign secretary, which is, I believe, a largely ceremonial role. This is up for debate, but he doesn't have any real power, at least domestic power. And that's pretty good because he's not an elected official. But now he is making noise because he is trying to increase the UK's international aid budget, which is obviously very contentious because we're in a cost of living crisis and people are questioning why he wants to send more of our money abroad when there are thousands of homeless people that are not even getting a place to stay, but we're spending millions of pounds a day to house asylum seekers and people coming across the channel on boats. So obviously Lord Cameron is not going down as well as people thought, and that's no surprise to anyone with half a brain.
Rita.
Well, Labor are headed for a certain victory, it looks like, if the polls are accurate. Are we going to see another challenge to the Tory leadership, because Rishi Sunak seems to be, hopeless? Suella Braverman's letter was just damning in detailing his many failures. Could she challenge possibly, or somebody else who's got a bit more conservative credentials?
Well, at the moment, conservative leadership is a bit of a poison chalice because it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, obviously, Rishi Sunak's leadership is not going as positively as he would have hoped. But the reality is there's very little to stop the sinking ship of the Conservative Party. I was saying that one must die in order to be reborn, and it might actually take some years in opposition for the Tories to become a Conservative Party. They are the biggest opposition to conservatism here in Britain. And it's really unfortunate. With Suella Braverman, obviously, she's been keeping Rishi's feet to the fire, particularly with the fact that the Supreme Court earlier this week called the Rwanda scheme unlawful, and so that's put a bit of a delay in the government's plans. But Rishi Sunak has said that he's adamant of getting planes to Rwanda by the spring, or at the very least before the next general election. That's doubtful, particularly according to Suella Braverman, who says that his new plan is just tinkering at the edges. At the end of the day, you have to effectively nullify the courts or the European Convention of Human Rights influence on the Rwanda scheme to make it happen. But the idea that Suella Braverman might be making a challenge for leadership, that is possible. It's likely to happen after the election. But again, Conservatives have to be careful because she has a very strong stance on immigration, which most people in the Conservative Party agree with. And actually many working class red wall Labour voters would agree with as well. Immigration in this country is just ridiculous. We're going to see figures next week published that will likely show that net immigration into Britain has exceeded 1 million in the last few years, which is ridiculous
James.
for a tiny island.
This is
but it's important.
I just want to ask Esther on this. I mean, tell us exactly, because I couldn't understand what Suella Braverman had done to fall afoul of the Sunak government, except, I guess, be too conservative. Where do Conservatives now in Britain go? And I mean, if the Tories aren't going to stand up for borders, for national sovereignty, for all of these very basic principles, which, as you say, many working class Labour voters would agree with as well. They seem to be perfectly sensible, and instead is captured by this elite perspective, which seems to think that the borders should be always open and anybody should be able to come in at any time and be settled. Where do Conservative voters go?
Well, this is the issue, because I think the overarching issue that we are seeing here is not necessarily the fact that Suella Braverman is actually, has conservative principles, but because the party is lacking in actual talent and people with political acumen. She became a bit radioactive because she made some incendiary comments about the fact that homeless people that set up tents is become a bit of like a lifestyle. And obviously it was very controversial here because she was effectively saying that homelessness is a lifestyle. And she also published an article with the Times without the approval of Downing Street to redact certain statements. So she did have a bit of infighting with Rishi Sunak in that respect. But I think the real point is an acute lack of political will, because actually she was fired for being the one time when she was right, and she is right on many occasions, but this time she was completely spot on, particularly with regards to the police's bias when it comes to policing the pro-Palestinian protests, the fact that they've effectively been very lax in their approach to certain types of protests. So she was spot on. Her stance on immigration and illegal immigration, and the fact that we need to curb this wave of channel migrants coming over. She is right, but at the end of the day, you have to take that strong political stance and mix it with political acumen. And unfortunately, that's not really something that you've seen amongst our politicians across the board. So that's something that made her position with Rishi Sunak untenable.
The problem you've got there, Esther, is the same problem we have in certain local Liberal governments here, which is the bedwetters of the Conservative Party. You've got two terrific, you've got Kemi Badenoch, you've got Suella Braverman,
yes.
You've got some great Conservatives in that party, and I hope they'll come to the fore. But just very quickly, the BBC up to their normal tricks, Esther. Just going to quickly play you what they reported about Israel blowing up, supposedly, Israel's tactics in Gaza. Have a listen first.
We are hearing from Reuters that is reporting that it says its forces are carrying out an operation against Hamas in Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital, and they are targeting people, including medical teams as well as Arab speakers.
Now, that's the greatest blood libel of all time, that the Israelis were targeting Arab speakers and medics, when in fact the report was that they were taking them with them into the hospital to help. The BBC then had to put this apology forward. Have a listen.
And now an apology from the BBC. BBC News, as it covered initial reports that Israeli forces has entered Gaza's main hospital. We said that medical teams and Arab speakers were being targeted. This was incorrect and misquoted a Reuters report. We should have said IDF forces included medical teams and Arabic speakers for this operation. So we apologise for this error, which fell below our usual editorial standards. The correct version of events was broadcast minutes later.
I would have thought it is their usual broadcasting standards. Esther, what are your thoughts on that controversy?
Yeah, ironic as well. Yes, you would think so. I mean, this is the second major gaffe that the BBC has made over this conflict. The first was obviously broadcasting that Israel had struck a hospital when it was actually a Hamas rocket, and now they're suggesting that the IDF were actually targeting Arab medics when they were actually bringing them in. Because they were conducting a military operation at the Al-Shifa hospital. But the issue here is obviously credibility, because if you have our state broadcaster that has had many gaps, that has taken very clear political partisan positions, making this kind of mistake in a very heated conflict where you're seeing thousands and thousands of people take to the streets, you've seen a rise in anti-Semitism and hate speech, and all of the brouhaha that's going along with this conflict, this is deeply irresponsible. And you really have to wonder, what editorial standards are they referring to? Because we're yet to see them.
Absolutely. Here. Esther Krakue, always great to speak to you from London. Thanks so much.